Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm one of the pastors around here. So glad to be with you today. So the year was 2012. It was July-ish, I think, if I remember right. And my three sons had just kind of finished a pretty laid-back, good summer of rec level baseball. And it was, we were just enjoying our time together as a family. But during that season, it was becoming clearer and clearer to my wife and I that our 7-year-old was going to go pro. And so, it was just playing out in front of us, like we were just seeing it happen. And so we thought, now is the time. Now is the time we make the jump from this rec level stuff, and we're going to go try out for select baseball for the very first time. It was kind of our first jump into that world. And so we took Corbin, was his name. We took him, still is his name. Anyway, we took him to his first tryout. And I remember being there. It was awesome. I played some pretty high-level baseball growing up. My wife played softball, and so it was fun for us to be there and to watch this happen because it was like little adults out there trying out for baseball, and they did the hitting station, the fielding station, and they ended it off with time in their run from home to first to second. It was just really fun to watch, and man, it was a great experience for us. And so afterwards, we took the family to our favorite Mexican restaurant, and I had a lawyer lined up to look over the contracts. It was a whole thing, right? I was all prepared. Honestly, I had no idea what was coming. And so I remember I got a phone call while we were at dinner, and I stepped outside our favorite restaurant there, and I'm standing there, and I hear the coach on the other side of the line say, "Hey, we would love to offer Corbin a spot on Millard Elite 8U baseball team." And so Millard, he was 8, guys, come on. Anyway, if you know anything about select baseball, this was the top level, they call it a majors level team in the city. This was the team. I was shocked. I'm embarrassed to say this, but literally on the phone, it felt like I just got the call that he went number 1 in the draft. It was awesome. And so I went in and shared that with him. He was super excited. I was excited because it was the best team and some of the best baseball, and he was excited because they had cool jerseys. But that was about how it went. And then I remembered our third son, it was time for him. He was turning 8, and it was time for him to go try out. And he made another high top level team. And this time they asked me to coach. And so I had the opportunity to coach my son through select baseball. And it was amazing. But to say our calendars were full would be quite the understatement, if you could imagine. Just tons of tournaments. I remember a season, one summer in particular, where our oldest son was still playing, kind of rec level baseball. My other 2 sons are playing select ball. I'm coaching one of the teams, and Cadence decides she wants to run club track for the first time. All taking place during the same season with just 2 parents and no extended family. We were going nuts. It was crazy. Our vacations were tournaments to Kansas City. That was about as good as it got for us. But that was our life. And now I look back on it. And it was difficult. It was hard to make that all work out. I wouldn't trade any of it, not a moment of it, for anything else in the world. Well, we're in the final week of our series that we've kind of titled Fill the Gap. And you're either thinking, oh, thank goodness, we're finally done. Either you're bored with the topic and you're come up with something new next time, please. Or some of the messages have hit a little bit too deep. I've had a few conversations with some people around that it seems to hit home for a lot of people. But either way, we're wrapping this thing up. And what we've said from the beginning, just as a little bit of a recap, is we've said that any of us, as we walk into a church's building or churches gathered for the first time, that we have an expectation of what we're going to experience when we get there. I talked about a lot of stats that would say that a lot of us show up to a church for the sermon or the content, but if content was king, you can get the best content in the world in the phone in your pocket, right? You can get that. So there's something else. We come expecting real relationships. We want to connect with people. We want to have people that, as we say around here, do life with, right? But what we actually experience is a little bit different. We show up and there's some nice handshakes, there's some smiling faces, there's some great people that open the door for us, but real relationship hasn't really been the thing that you've experienced. And so we've been asking the question, what do we do to fill the gap between what we expected when we got here and what we're actually experiencing? Because we really want deep, real connection, people who know our names, who would carry our burdens with us, who would show up when we're in need. And those things just aren't happening for a lot of us. And so what do we do with that gap? That's what we've been talking about. And we've been doing kind of a deep dive into one chapter of a letter written by the Apostle Paul to a group of Jesus followers in the town of Ephesus way back. And the Apostle Paul, if you don't know, we talk about this a lot, but like he was pretty anti-Christian. Like that was what he was known for. His whole desire was to try and eradicate this thing called the church off the face of the earth. If he would have had his way early on, you and I wouldn't be here today. But something happened. He had an encounter with a resurrected Jesus that radically transformed his life. And he became the one that was the biggest champion of what we're now experiencing right now. And so that's what took place in his life. And so we've been looking at one chapter in that letter that he wrote to the church of Ephesus in our Bibles. It's called Ephesians. And if you're really astute, if you've been paying a lot of attention, you would have noticed last week we finished that chapter. We got to the end of chapter 4, and you're thinking you're going to get to hear something new today. Well, you're wrong. I cheated. I wanted to jump into what he has to say in one small part of Ephesians 5. And here's the deal. Here's the reason I wanted to do that, because a lot of what we've talked about over these 6 weeks is really important. I really do believe that the first 5 weeks are things that we need to be better at, things that we need to shift our thinking on, areas where we need to put a little bit more effort that will allow us to have those relationships. I really do believe that. But what we're talking about today, I think, is the biggest problem within our culture. The thing we're talking about today is the thing that actually really keeps us from experiencing the relationships that we want to have. Because we all want meaningful relationships, but we just don't have the time, right? We all want the relationships, we just can't seem to find the time. You've probably heard this before. I don't know if you know this, but like the average lifespan of Americans is about 75 years or so. And so I thought it'd be interesting to look at how we spend some of those 75 years. We spend 26 of those 75 years sleeping, which is important. Like we should do that to be healthy. We spend about 7 of those years trying to fall asleep, which nobody enjoys that. We spend 11 years or so watching TV. And I purposefully chose not to add YouTube and other content to that because those numbers get ridiculous. We spend 11 years at work. Some of us spend 11, I don't know if we all do, right? We spend 2.6 years getting ready, or at least women do. Men spend about 1.8 years getting ready, just grooming themselves to get ready. I actually could grow hair. I just don't want to spend the extra time. I just don't want that time. We spend 1.5 years in the restroom not getting ready. So other things that take place in the restroom. And I think the phone has had a lot to do with that, let's be honest. We spend, if 15 years or older, we spend about 5 hours a day on sports or recreation. And that adds up to quite a few years over the course of 75 years. And really the idea being, obviously a lot of those things aren't optional. Like we can't choose to not do those things. And you may have noticed that I purposefully didn't even speak about social media. I mean, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse with the social media stuff. We all know we spend too much time there. But the idea is being this: when we really dissect our 75 years that we might have, or hopefully more for a lot of us, right? It's not that there isn't time. There is time. It's just that the time that we have is already spent. And we spend it on what we value because we make time for what we value. We make time for what we really value. And the gap between the connection we want and the connection that we're actually experiencing is often filled with time wasted on things that we value. And the gap that we're dealing with today is this: that the expectation being, I want meaningful relationships, and the experience being, but I'm just too busy, I don't have the time. And Paul is actually challenging that idea in the verses we're reading today, because he believes that wisdom doesn't just manage our time. Wisdom actually takes the time that we have and redeems it for the things of greatest value. And so in verse 15, he says, be careful. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. See, Paul is encouraging followers of Jesus to be careful with how we live our lives, understanding that every decision that we make in every moment of life has the potential to be a wise decision or an unwise decision. The original Greek, which is the language the New Testament was originally written in, for the word careful, it carries this sense of being deliberate or precise with our lives. Not just letting life or our calendar happen to us, but waking up to the reality that we do make time for what we value, that we actually do have some control on what our calendars look like. And I'll remind you of something that you already know to be true. You don't accidentally end up with a meaningful life or meaningful relationships. You make time for them. You're deliberate with what goes on your calendar. Before anything robs you of your time, you're at least asking this question: is this use of time wise or unwise? Will it add into what I value, or will it pull away from what I value? And I know that's not the easiest decision all the time. I know that can be really difficult, especially for young parents, which I just thought of a lot as I wrote this message this week. That's why James, who's the younger brother of Jesus, he's got really some awesome things to say about that. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. What an awesome promise. The writer of Proverbs would say it this way: there's a way that seems right to man, but in the end it leads to death. I'd say there's a way that seems normal to the world, a busyness about life, a craziness to life that seems normal to the world around us, but ultimately will lead to disconnection and isolation. When you look at over the course of your life, the thing that seems normal to us is that it's normal to automatically accept the promotion you've been offered. Even though you know it's gonna mean 3 more days of travel per week, it's just normal you're gonna take that step up the ladder because that's what the world tells you to do. It's just normal to accept the position on that higher level team, that even though you know they're gonna do 62 weekend tournaments a year or whatever, they're gonna be gone all the time. And it's just normal because you take the next step, you do the next thing. That's what the world tells us. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. I'm not. None of those things are bad in and of themselves. It's just, are you asking the question as you're making the decision? I remember extremely vividly one moment again with Corbin. It's kind of a theme, right? Corbin's life. He just turned 22 yesterday. So good job for Corbin. Anyway, so I remember laying in our bed as me and my wife, we were in our bedroom, and Corbin was sitting on the floor in our bedroom. And we were just agonizing over a decision. Corbin had been offered a spot in high school on a team called the Prospects. And that's what it was. It was a college prospect team. And Corbin was at this crux of trying to determine what he wants to do next in the future. For Corbin to have Division I opportunities, he probably needed to play on this team. Omaha's not a hotbed for recruiters coming in to look at people. And so this team was going to give him the opportunity to play in Atlanta and LA and all these bigger cities where people could go see him. This was his Division I opportunity. And so we're sitting there just agonizing over the decision. The first decision was we can't afford it. Well, then he finds out from the coach he gets a scholarship if he wants to play. And so now we're trying to determine what this actually means for our family. And we know what it means for our family, because not only is select baseball crazy, but you get to this level and it's every weekend flying somewhere, doing different things. It was nuts. But the question was constantly being asked: how do we help our son do what he loves? How do we help him become what he might be able to become in this, and also make wise decisions? It was just agonizing for us. And so we're constantly asking that question: is this a wise or an unwise decision? But being careful with how you live, being wise, at least ask the question: is this decision going to lead to what we really value, or will it take away from what we really value? Verse 16, Paul says, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. And the translation of the phrase, or another translation of this verse uses the phrase, make the best use of your time. Make the best use of your time. And that phrase, making the most of it, actually means, in Greek, it means to buy up for yourself. Meaning this isn't a passive kind of just letting things happen to you. It's an active acquisition, or when you say to buy something, it insinuates that it has value, that you're investing in it. The word used for time right there is not the word chronos, which is where we get the word chronological. So it's not a sequential idea about time. It's actually the word kairos, which means it's kind of a more opportunistic time, like things just that happen to come up, which means there's times in our lives where you'll have the opportunity to make a wise choice that leads to relationship. Now, we talked a little bit about some scheduling stuff. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit, but certainly we've all experienced the one-offs, right? The random text from a friend to grab coffee, or somebody checking in to see if maybe you wanted to grab lunch later that day. We've experienced those times. And so Paul isn't actually speaking about the number of hours that we have available in a day. Paul's trying to help us recognize the critical moments in our lives where connection and relationship are actually possible. But we so often feel like we just don't have the time, and so we skip over them often. Holly and I have a good set of friends that are part of our church that oftentimes they'll send us a text with just this photo on it, like no words to it, just this photo. And what we've learned, what that means is they've actually identified that, hey, we've got a free evening available. It was unexpected, but they put this sign out in the driveway so their neighbors, as they drive by, will know, hey, later tonight, we're gonna be hanging out in the driveway. We would love to connect with you if you wanna come over. And so they send us this text and we get to decide if we're gonna go over and hang out with them that night or not. I have another friend who's a part of our church as well who often let me know, hey, later tonight, I'm having a cigar night with the guys. We're gonna do a fire pit in our driveway. We'd love to have you come if you're not doing anything. And if you're thinking to yourself, those don't sound like very pastoral examples, don't blame me for my friends. It's not my fault they're heathens. They need Jesus just as much. And it never fails, right? It never fails. These invitations come on a Sunday afternoon. And after my one day of work, I am so tired. I have to decide in that moment, like, am I gonna just sit around the house and watch some golf and some TV? Or am I gonna buy back this opportunity? Am I gonna buy back this time that I have with these people to connect with them relationally and really develop those relationships? And I don't always answer that question well. I don't. There's plenty of times that I lay down on my couch instead. But every time I do respond to that in a way that ultimately leads to relationship, I leave those times feeling filled up by people, by connecting with them and building that relationship with them. And so I've just learned that the gap between I want deep relationships and I don't have time, it closes when we start to recognize that the time that we do have, we can buy that back. And we can make an intentional effort to be in relationship with people. Verse 17, therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. And again, the word foolish here, it's not talking about low IQ kind of foolishness. It's kind of more low awareness of what's going on. It's drifting through life without asking the question, hey, what does God want to do with this moment? We talk all the time about doing the next moment with Jesus. And so this is that. Like, what does God want to do with this moment? It's letting habits and screens and busyness be what makes the decision for you. That's the foolishness he's talking about. So Paul says, hey, don't become a fool, which means we actually have the potential, we have the strength to resist that drift towards isolation and seclusion, that we can actually move towards people. We don't have to do the normal thing like the world around us. And then he says this phrase, understand what the Lord's will is, to which you probably think, oh, that's all I have to do? Thanks, Paul. Like, as if that's not the most existential question of life, right? Like, we're constantly wanting to know what that is. But we tend to do this kind of mysterious thing with God's will when we're asking questions about our career path or what school we should go to or what big decisions we should make, or should Corbin play on the prospects or not the prospects. Like, we're looking for God's will and all this stuff. But God, he's actually done something pretty special for us. And that's what Paul's talking about to us. The fact that God's revealed his will to us in a lot of things. And should we choose to actually use that filter in a lot of these bigger questions, we'd start to see God is pretty clear on a lot of things. That's what Paul's talking about. But God's been clear about what his will is for us, especially relationally, because he's told us that we should live wisely, that we should love people, that we should walk in the light, that we should build the kind of community where others are known and strengthened, that we should one another, right? There's a whole list of how we should one another, that we should submit to one another, that we should care for one another, love one another, serve one another, carry one another's burdens. So when I say I don't have time for meaning relationships, Paul would say that's not a schedule problem. That's a wisdom problem. You're not making the wise choices because time doesn't get redeemed by good intentions. Time gets redeemed when our intentions get aligned with God's priority. Again, staying on the Corbin thing, I'm just keep it real simple today. Corbin is currently living with Ronnie, one of my old best friends. He's the pastor of the church I was a part of there. And so they're in a pretty good relationship. And like Ronnie's been doing some mentoring thing with Corbin. And Ronnie told me the story last week of that he and Corbin had gone out to lunch. And Corbin's just kind of sharing with him what's going on in his heart, his relationship with God. And he says the phrase, man, it's hard for me to get up in the morning, but I really do want to spend time with God. And Ronnie says this, no, you don't. And I love it. I love it. I just go hard after that because we know it's true, right? If you wanted to, you would. You want to, but if you wanted to, you would. Like I say the same thing all the time. Like when people say, hey, I want to go to the gym. No, you don't. You want to go to the gym. Because if you wanted chocolate, you'd figure out how to get the chocolate, right? Here's the deal. We either make time for what we value, or the way we spend our time will reshape what we value. We either make time for what we really do value, or our time will prove what we really do value. And wisdom is learning to value what God values and then living life like that. So throughout today, maybe you picked up on it, I've been trying to share with you a little bit about my history, what my life was like with my family, especially when my kids were younger. And I did that on purpose because I want you to see that I come at this subject as somebody who understands. I'm not just like coming up with good ideas and trying to tell you should do it. I know what it's like. I've been there. And when I was in that season of life, there were plenty of times that I felt shame placed upon me, either from a sermon I heard or some Instagram post that was telling me I was doing it all wrong. and I just know how hard it is to answer the question, how do I do this? How do I support my kids in what they love? How do I spend time with them in the things that they're enjoying? How do I help them excel in the thing that they're good at? And how do I be a wise husband and father who ultimately helps us make the best use of our time? That is a very tough, a very real struggle that you walk in. So let me show you a picture of another thing that took place during that season of our lives. And so this is our life group that we were a part of. And I had hair, look at that. I don't know what was happening with my hair at that point. It was kind of a Wade, kind of mohawky thing that I was going for. But this was our life group. And so over the course of about 5 years, every Sunday evening we spent with this life group. And these are the people that, man, we did everything with when it came to what was going on in our lives. When we talk about carrying each other's burdens, these are the people that we did that with. One of the gentlemen in this group went through divorce and a bout with alcoholism, and he lived on our couch for months. When our house got hit by a tornado, these are the people who showed up to come help us clean up our house. When things took place in our lives, these were the people that got called, and these are the people that came to help. That's what it looked like for us. Did we want to always do that? No. Did we want to clean our house after a long tournament weekend so that we could be ready for guests? We certainly did not want to do that. Did we have to cancel sometimes because we had life stuff going on? Of course we did. But after every group that we had, regardless of how tired we were when we were cleaning up, how much we didn't want to do it that night, we would stand across from each other at our kitchen island and say, man, that was so worth it. There's so much value to what took place. Man, and ironically, this isn't a you have to join a life group sermon. That's not what this is all about. I do absolutely believe that being a part of a smaller group of people, especially within a church as large as ours, that it really is the best way to close the gap between your expectation and your experience when it comes to relationships. I do believe that. Life groups are great. And there are so many people who are part of our church who would tell you, honestly, that their life group is the best spent time of their week. I also know that there are so many of us that are in a season of life that would look at that, a scheduled time once a week, and think that's not possible for me. And so how do we walk this thing out? How do we actually do it? Because regardless of the amount of time you have available, the truth remains you make time for what you value. And we all have moments. We all have moments that we can buy back and invest in the relationships that we desire so much. And so throughout the series, I've tried to be what I've kind of labeled this painfully practical, just so obvious with some practical opportunities for you. And these are not to be a long list of to-dos. That's not really my intention at all. I don't expect anybody to do all of the different things that I've talked about throughout this series. But my hope is that there might be one or two things throughout the series that you can actually put into your life and begin to see some change in what God might do in your life if you begin to walk some of these things out. And so the first one today is this: put one relational block on your calendar this week. To fill the gap between I want relationships and I don't have time, it will eventually require some deliberate, scheduled time to make that happen over the course of time. Because deep relationships, they are built when you spend a lot of time with people. That we all know that. So my challenge is find a time, find a meal, maybe join a group, go on a walk with a friend, show up for the invite. Second thing is this, buy up one Kairos moment. Say yes to the invite that you'd normally skip. Surely there's something in your life that happens often and you can recognize, hey, I turn that down so often. Maybe I can buy back that time with my friend. And then this, trade one low value habit for one high value investment. Netflix is like the worst when it comes to this, right? Like you finish an episode and you have 15 seconds to decide, am I gonna waste another hour? Like so much pressure, right? You have to decide. Could you put aside one low value habit for a time and invest in one thing that has high value? Invest in that relationship. What would that look like for you? Because the gap is real. The gap is real between the connection we expected and the connection we've actually experienced. And every week, Paul has basically given us a map, if you will, a roadmap to become a mature body of believers with Christ at the head. With unity instead of drift, right? With participation instead of spectating, with a new self instead of old instincts, with words that build up instead of words that burn, with forgiveness instead of bitterness. But the reality is that we've looked at today, none of those things happen on accident. So we fill the gap. We infill the gap with what I'm praying is this, right? That this wouldn't just be a series that you show up to on a Sunday and listen to. And you enjoy some and you don't like some and you walk out of here and it really means nothing. My prayer has been this whole time that this series would somehow help us as a church know what it looks like to do every moment of life with Jesus, and that we would take something away that would help us do that. Because Paul's vision for us all those years before is that you and I would be a mature body, where we would be a people where other people are known and cared for and built up in love, where there is no gap between expectation and experience. But that kind of church doesn't happen by accident. It happens when ordinary people like you and me decide to buy back ordinary moments and invest in what's ultimately most valuable to us. Would you pray with me? Jesus, I've said this every week, I think, and I'm just so grateful for your word and what we're able to take away from it, the way that you put something into this world that can be a roadmap for us to know what it looks like. It actually looks like to do every moment with you and to have our lives completely transformed by you. And so I pray that those of us who have listened in on what you've had to say over the last 6 weeks, that you're impacting hearts and changing lives. That this wouldn't just be a series that's one and done and gone, but it'd be something that is really continuing to work in us as a church. Because we all want to experience that. We all want a church that's mature and loving and caring, lifting each other up, carrying each other's burdens. We want those things. Help us to be the type of church that does the work, that puts the work in and invests enough to see that happen. We love you. Pray all these things in your name. Amen. Well, church, it's been good. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.